You yokel. How's it going, everybody?
Welcome back, everyone. So we really got to get somebody to manage the recording because I've been forgetting to do that a lot lately.
So this is part 2 of part 2.
So this is reshoot 1 of part 2 of the Eye of Argon. All right. Surrounded by an iron gate with a lush garden. Blah blah blah. Okay, yeah. The group was admitted through the gilded gateway, and Grigner was led along a stone pathway bordered by plush vegetation, lustfully enhanced by the moon's shimmering rays.
Nice.
Upon reaching the palace, the group was granted entrance, and after several minutes of explanation, led through several winding corridors to a richly draped chamber. Confronting the group was a short, stocky man seated upon a golden throne. Tapestries of richly draped regal blue silk covered all walls of the chamber, while the steps leading to the throne were plated with sparkling white ivory. Fuck me, this guy describes too much.
Yeah.
The man upon the throne had a naked wench seated at each of his arms, and a trusted advisor sitting in back of him. At each corner of the chamber, a guard stood at attention, with upraised pikes supported in their hands. Golden chainmail adorning their torsos as in possessive, and barred helmets emitting scarlet plumes and shrouding their heads. The man rose from his throne to the dais surrounding it. His plush turquoise robe dangled loosely from his chunky frame. The soldiers surrounding Grigner fell to their knees with heads bowed to the stone masonry of the floor in fearful dignity to their sovereign, liege. That's where he copy pasted from the
Yeah, I was gonna say, just funny how you actually
from the thesaurus.
pronounce the comma.
Well, I mean it's
liege.
Well, sovereign liege is kind of redundant.
No, it's just
Explain the purpose of this intrusion upon my chateau. Your serenity, resplendent in noble grandeur, we have brought this yokel before you. In parentheses, the soldier gestured towards Grigner. For the redress or your all-knowing wisdom in judgment regarding his fate. Down on your knees, lout, and pay proper homage to your sovereign, commanded the pudgy noble of Grigner. He's not Grigner's pudgy noble.
now he is.
By the surly beard of Mrifk, Grigner kneels to no man, scowled the massive barbarian. You dare to deal this blasphemous act to me? You are indeed brave, stranger, yet your valor smacks of foolishness.
Breathe.
Gotta get by that one. I find you to be the only fool sitting upon your pompous throne, enhancing the rolling flabs of your belly in the midst of your elaborate luxury and... The soldier standing at Grigner's side smote him heavily in the face with the flat of his sword, cutting short the harsh words and knocking his battered helmet to the masonry with an echoing clang. The paunchy noble's sagging round face flushed suddenly pale, then hastily lit up to a lustrous cherry-red radiance, like a fucking chameleon. His lips trembled with malicious rage while emitting a muffled, sibilant gibberish. His sagging flabs... This guy sags a lot. His sagging flabs rolled like a tub of upset jelly, then compressed as he sucked in his gut in an attempt to conceal his softness.
Me on every date.
The prince regained his statue, then spoke to the soldiers surrounding Grigner, his face conforming to an ugly expression of sadistic humor. Take this uncouth heathen to the vault of misery, and be sure that his agonies are long and drawn out before death can release him.
I'm gonna release something.
As you wish, sire. Your command shall be heeded immediately, answered the soldier on the right of Grigner as he stared into the barbarian's seemingly unaffected face. The advisor seated in the back of the noble slowly rose and advanced to the side of his master, motioning the wenches seated at his sides to remove themselves. He lowered his head and whispered to the noble, Eminence, the punishment you have decreed will cause much misery to this scum, yet it will only last a short time, then release him into a land beyond the sufferings of the human body. Why not mellow him out in one of the subterranean vaults for a few days, then send him to life labor in one of your buried mines? To one such as he, a life spent in the confinement of the Stygian pits will be an indefinitely more appropriate and lasting torture. The noble cupped his drooping double chin in the folds of his brimming palm, meditating for a moment on... Meditating for like a second? Meditating.
The key to meditation. Get it over with.
Meditating for a moment upon the rationality of the counselor's words, then raised his shaggy brown eyebrows and turned toward the advisor, eyes aglow. As always, Agathond, you speak with great wisdom. Your words ring of great knowledge concerning the nature of one such as he, saith the king. As a whole sentence. The noble turned toward the prisoner with a noticeable shimmer reflecting in his frog-like eyes and his lips contorting into a greasy grin. I have decided to void my previous decree. Decided to void my previous decree. The prisoner shall be removed to one of the palace's underground vaults. There he shall stay until I have decided that he is sufficiently simmered, whereupon he is to be allowed to spend the remainder of his days at labor in one of my mines. Upon hearing this, Grigner realized that his fate would be far less merciful than death to one such as he, who is used to roaming the countryside at will. That doesn't flow well. A life of confinement would be more than his body and mind could stand up to. This type of life would be immeasurably worse than death. I shall never understand the ways if your twisted civilization. I simply defend my honor and am condemned to life confinement by a pig who sits on his royal ass, wooing whores and knows nothing of the affairs of the land he imagines to rule. Lectures Grigner?
Question mark?
Enough of this. Away with the slut before I loose my control.
Don't get too loose over there, Steve. Okay, here. I'll point you in the way. Home is, see that, like, brown penis over there? I erected that for home base.
So the brown penis is home.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Just like my childhood.
Jesus Christ.
So at the top.
The slut before I loosed my control. It's the first line on the button.
Okay. Oh, yes, I was gonna say, I was pretty sure it was the top. Enough of this. Away with the slut before I loose my control. Seeing the peril of the situation, Grignar searched for an opening. Crushing prudence to the sword, he swallowed into the soldier at his hand. Into the soldier at his left arm, taking hold of his sword, and bounding to the dais, supporting the prince before the startled guards could regain their composure. Agathond left Grignar and his sire, but found a sword blade permeating the length of his ribs before he could loose his weapon. The counselor slumped to his knees as Grignar slid his crimson blade from Afghan's ribcage. The fat prince stood undulating in Jesus Christ, insurmountable fear before the edge of the fiery maned comet. His flabs of jelly blubber pulsating to and fro. Jesus, this is like a 90s song. To and fro in ripples of flowing terror. Where is your wisdom and power now, your majesty? Growled Grignar. The prince went rigid as Grignar discerned him glazing over his shoulder. He swiveled to note the cause of the noble's attention, raised his sword over his head, and prepared to leash a vicious downward cleft, but fell short of the haft of a steel-rimed pike clashed against his unguarded skull. Then blackness and solitude. Silence enshrouding and ever peaceful reigned supreme. Jesus. Before me, Sarah. Before me as always, ha 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 ha! Nobly crackled. Consciousness returned to Grignard in stigmatic pools as his mind gradually cleared of the cobwebs cluttered in his inner recess. Yet the Stygian, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
The Stygian cloud of charcoal ebony remained. An incompatible shield of blackness enhanced the bleak absence of sound by the beacon. Grignard's muddled brain reeled from the shock of the blow he had received to the base of his skull. The events of the I guess I probably should have just quickly said, after he was like, ha ha ha, nobly crackled. Cackled. Jesus Christ. Chapter 3. When consciousness returned to him. Grignard's muddled brain
I'm dead.
reeled from the shock of the blow he had received to the base of his skull. The events leading to his predicament were slow to filter back to him. He dickered with the notion that he was dead and was descended or sunk. However it may be, to the shadowed land before there's two thes, beyond the aperture of the grave, but rejected his hypnosis then when his memory sifted back into his grips. This was not the land of the dead. It was something infinitely more precarious than anything the grave could offer. Death promised an infinity of peace, but the finite misery of an inactive life confined of torture, forever concealed from the life-bearing shafts of the beloved rising sun.
Life-bearing shafts, huh?
Jesus Christ. The orb that had been before taken for granted, yet now cherished above all else, to be forever refused further glimpses of the snow-capped summits of the land of his birth, never again to witness the thrill of plundering unexplored lands before the crest of bleeding horizon, and perhaps worst of all, the denial to ever again encompass the lustful excitement of caressing the naked curves of a body of trim young. It's yound is how he. I think it's young is what he's going for.
Yes.
Wench, of a trim yound wench. This was indeed one of the buried chasms of hell, concealed within the inner depths of the palace's despised interior. A fearful ebony chamber devised to drive the brinks of insanity to the minds of the unfortunately condemned, through the inapt solitude of limbo of listless, dreary silence. Ooh, gotta scroll down.
Oh, it's the right thumbstick. Shit.
Going all over the place. Chapter 3.5, because there's half chapters.
Just move the cursor to the
Oh yeah, it's the left analog stick. There's so many things to do.
I know.
A tightly wrung elliptical circle of torches cast their wavering shafts prancing morbidly over the smooth surface of a rectangular rigid altar. Expertly chiseled forms of grotesque gargoyles graced the oblique rim protuberating the length of the grim orifices of death, staring forever ahead into nothingness in complete ignorance of the bloody rites enacted in their presence. Brown flaking stains decorated the golden surface of the rigid underwear that I am wearing. No, just kidding. Of the ridge surrounding. Okay.
That is a laugh.
That's a laugh and a half right there.
So where was that?
Brown flaking stains.
Okay.
Title of my autobiography.
Brown flaking stains decorating the golden surface of the ridge surrounding the altar, which banked to a small slit at the lower right-hand corner of the altar. The slit stood above a crudely pounded pail, which had several silver-meshed chalices hanging at its sides, dangling at the rim of golden mallet, the handle of which was engraved with images of twisted faces and groved at its far end with slots designed for a snug hand grip.
Jesus.
All that for a fucking hammer.
Fuck.
The head of the mallet was slightly larger than a clenched fist and shaped into a smooth oval mass. Encircling the marble altar was a congregation of leering shaman, eerie chants of a bygone age, originating unknown eons before the memory of man, were being uttered from the buried recesses of the acolytes. Deep lings. I think that was supposed to be lungs.
Oh.
Orange paint was smeared in generous globules over the tops of the priests' wrinkled, shaven wrists, with silvered silk lashes latched with ebony buckles in the shape of morose, misshapen misshaped skulls.
I know, it's treacherous to read.
Dangling around their necks were oval-fashioned medallions held by thin gold chains featuring in their centers blood-red rubies, which is spelled singular with an S at the end, which resembled crimson fetish eyeballs. The fuck is a fetish eyeball?
You're about to find out.
Cushioning their bare feet were plush red felt slippers with pointed... because they weren't bare feet. Were plush felt red slippers with pointed golden spikes projecting from their tips. They're wearing fucking shoes. They're not bare feet.
I'll show you a tip.
I'm sure.
Just the tip. Any more than the tip is too much. Whoa.
Situated in front of the altar and directly adjacent to the copper pail was a massive jade idol, a misshaped, hideous bust of the shaman's pagan deity. The shimmering green idol was placed in a sitting posture on an ornately carved golden throne raised upon a round, ivory-plated dais. I think that was supposed to be ivory. Its bulging arms and webbed hands resting on the padded arms of the seat. Its head was entwined in golden snake-like coils hanging over its oblong ears, which tapered off to thin, hollow points. Its nose was a bulging triangular mass, sunken in at the sides, with gaping nostrils. Dramatic beneath the nostrils was a twisted, shaggy-lipped mouth, giving the impressions of a slavering, sadistic grimace. What?
Like he's talking about the
Yes.
purple guy from McDonald's.
Yeah, slavering isn't a word.
Not grimace. He was always my favorite.
At the foot of the heathen deity was a slender, pale-faced female, naked but for a golden, jeweled harness enshrouding her huge, outcropping breasts. Supporting long silver laces which extended to her thigh, stood before a pearl-white field with noticeable shivers traveling up and down the length of her exquisitely molded body. Her delicate lips trembled beneath soft, narrow hands as she attempted to conceal herself from the piercing stare of the ambivalent idol. Ambivalent means confused, that she's hiding behind her hand. So, none of that shit makes sense. Glaring directly down towards her was the stony, cycloptic face of the bloated deity. Gaping from its single, oblong socket was scintillating, many-faceted scarlet emerald. A brilliant gem, seeming to possess a life all of its own. A priceless gleaming stone capable of domineering the wealth of conquering empires. The Eye of Argon.
Fuck!
Chapter 4. All knowledge of measuring time had escaped Griegner. When a person is deprived of the sun, moon, and stars, he loses all conception of time as he had previously understood it. No, he doesn't. It seemed as if years had passed if time were being measured by terms of misery and mental anguish. Yet he estimated that his stay had only been a few days in length, so he does know time. That's a fucking contradiction. That's a fucking contradiction right there.
At its best, yeah, fuck.
He had slept 3 times and been fed 5 times since awakening in the crypt. However, when the actions of the body are restricted, its needs are also affected. The need for nourishment and slumber are directly proportional to the functions of the body has performed, meaning that when free and active, Griegner may become hungry every 6 hours and witness his desire for sleep every 15 hours, whereas in his present condition, he may encounter the need for food every 10 hours and the one for rest every 20 hours. Why? Why is this paragraph needed? All methods he had before depended upon were extinct in the dismal pit. Hence, he may have been imprisoned for 10 minutes or 10 years. He did not know, even though he figured he'd only been there for a couple of days.
I was gonna say, they just said that.
Resulting in a disheartened emotion deep within his being. Fuck, I'm done for right now. Jesus Christ. Oh, God, my brain hurts.
Oh, shit.
Oh, tune in
Oh,
next
man.
time to listen to us torture ourselves more with this horrendous, horrendous story.
20 more minutes of this shit.
Oh, God, we're only through chapter 4. We've got fucking 3.5 more chapters to go.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Oh, tune in next week.